On this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out, the Montreal Canadiens' high-flying offense is starting to feel a little grounded. We'll talk more about that and the Canadiens being victimized by shots to the head one too many times. All this and more on Hockey Inside Out. My name is Julian McKenzie. Joining me today, as always, the usual suspects: Montreal Gazette columnist Stu Cowan, Jessica Rusnak of CBC Daybreak Montreal, and former Canadiens defenseman and NHL assistant coach and the newest member to Twitter, Rick Green. Thank you all so much for joining us on this week's episode. Let's get right into it with these questions. We all remember how the first game of the Montreal Canadiens season went. They lost in overtime to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they scored all those goals, and they looked really good. Now, all of a sudden, things have changed. They lose to the Toronto Maple Leafs 4-2. It's not so much that they lost, but also the fact that they only scored 2 goals, and they're coming off games where we're also held to 2 goals against the Ottawa Senators on 2 different occasions. Something seems to be up with this offense here. But let's stick with the Toronto Maple Leafs game for a second. And I'm going to sound like a school teacher when I ask this, and I'll ask Rick because, I'm not sure how he was as a student in school, and I feel to kind of just be like a teacher in this moment with you. Rick, can you tell me what you learned from Wednesday night's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Well, I can understand the way that the Leafs played while they're first in the NHL. I mean, I was really impressed with their puck-moving defensemen. I mean, they struggled in that area for a number of years, and right now they have a pretty good group with good size and playing very, very well together, as a group back there. And then you have to give full marks to Anderson, who's been able to come up with timely saves and settle things down when they do make mistakes. But I have to give full marks to the way their defensive core is playing, and they're big and they're very, very effective right now, and they're having success because of a big part of their defense, the way they're moving the puck.
Yeah, and the Leafs won that game with Austin Matthews not scoring and Mitch Marner not picking up a point. The first 10 minutes, the Canadiens limited the Leafs to 1 shot, but the Leafs battled back and took advantage of the 4-on-4. The 4-on-4 opportunities really hurt the Canadiens. They couldn't get the puck out of their own zone. It was like a power play for the Leafs, and the Leafs scored 2 of their goals 4-on-4. So it was just a case of, the Leafs have the best talent in this division. There's no doubt about it. The Canadiens have depth, but as Rick mentioned, the Leafs have some depth now also. So it was a night where, the 4-on-4 really hurt the Canadiens, and as Rick said, the Leafs showed why. Not only are they the best team in the North Division, they're the best team in the NHL right now. They're 8-0-1 in their last 9 games, and now move 5 points ahead of the Canadiens in the standings. So as that gap widens, it's going to make it even more difficult for the Canadiens if they hope to finish in first place.
Yeah, the thing I was going to say that I learned from last night's game is that they really have to work on 4-on-4 because that hurt them. It also hurt them in the third period where they allowed Toronto to score 2 quick goals, 42 seconds apart. It's difficult at that point in the game to try and get back in it. The Thomas Tatar was able to make things interesting a little bit later in that third period, but the Canadiens just weren't able to find that extra push to try and get back into it. But this is going to be a game that's going to be fun to see when they do face them again on Saturday night. I'm sure they want to get their first win against Toronto. They're facing them 8 more times this season, and we'll see if they're able to take the experience from this game onto the weekend.
There's also a frustration factor, I think, with the Canadiens. After Tatar scored his goal, they showed him on the bench kicking the boards, and he was upset. I don't know, maybe that had to do with being taken off the line with Danault and Gallagher before he scored his goal, but there looked like there was some frustration setting in there with the Canadiens in the third period.
Well, and let's face it, they're dealing with a little adversity right now. Everything was going well for them, and now they've stumbled a little bit. So now there's a question of, okay, how do we correct it? But for whatever reason, last night, the Toronto Maple Leafs had a lot more jump in their stride and were much more effective at getting to loose pucks and making things happen. And the Canadiens looked like they were skating in sand, a number of times, and they just looked tired and struggled in a lot of areas. Their execution was bad, and this is not the team that we're used to seeing as of late, other than the last 3 games. But without panicking, they're obviously got enough guys to figure it out. But they have to do some correction for sure to get their A game back.
Yeah, that's 3 bad games in a row. And you mentioned with the corrections, they had 2 full days of practice before the game against the Leafs, which was supposed to work out whatever problems they had against the Senators, but obviously it didn't work out.
And, you know, it is a grind, and, you know, it's that balance between, video and on ice stuff. But anyways, everybody's dealing with it, and they're just one of many of the other teams that have tough schedules and have to figure out how to win again.
I'm wondering if Thomas Tatar was not just over the fact he may have had to switch lines. I wonder if he was upset because of the fact the team isn't scoring at the same clip that they were at the beginning of this season. Think about those 2 games against the Ottawa Senators and against the Toronto Maple Leafs. That offense, which is supposed to be regarded as the best in the National Hockey League, held to 2 goals in each of those games. I ask you all panelists, why aren't the Montreal Canadiens scoring at the same level that we saw them earlier this year?
I think the way when they started the season, there's that adrenaline of a new season. A lot of these new players want to make their mark on the team. So I think that might have had a lot to do with it, and maybe that's starting to wear off a little bit. But maybe even the schedule, you know, when they started the year against Vancouver, Vancouver was struggling. Even when they faced Edmonton, Edmonton was struggling at that point of the year too, and they took advantage of that. And they were probably feeling good about themselves. And then they had that stumbling block against Ottawa, the team that everyone thought that was going to be, you know, a walk in the park, and it proved that it was not. So I think that might have grounded them a little bit now, and they're starting to maybe not worry, but get concerned about certain aspects of their game that's now creeping up. And another thing that we've spoken about before is that they've been a lot more aggressive at the start. And the last few games, they've been very passive. You know, they haven't had that same kind of, you know, aggression to take control of the play, create things. And I think that could potentially be part of the difference.
And, you know, there was no preseason games this year, and the Canadiens had so many changes. So other teams didn't really have a chance to scout what the Canadiens would do. The Senators came up with a really good game plan to clog up the middle, slow the Canadiens down, worked really well. Brendan Gallagher spoke about how frustrating it was to play against them, and he credited the Senators for the system that they came up with. And he also warned that we're going to see more of this going forward. So other teams would have watched what the Senators did to slow down the Canadiens, and now all the teams are sort of have a game plan now that they see that works against the Canadiens. So the Canadiens are going to have to come up with a way to work around that, because speed is their game, and that's the Senators and the Leafs were both able to take that speed factor away and those counterattacks away. So it's not going to get easier for the Canadiens as they move forward. It's going to get harder.
Yeah, I agree, Stu. You know, their speed factor has not been an issue, and I think a lot of it starts from their transition game. And you look at the way that they execute the way their defense are able to move that puck intelligently and get a lot of their offense coming off the rush. And right now, a lot of their plays are broken through lack of concentration or lack of execution. And the result is broken plays in the neutral zone. And they're trying to do things that they weren't doing before, as in forcing plays and causing turnovers that ends up with the other team having possession of the puck. And the other area being that they do not get to the net with the same type of aggressiveness as what I've seen before. And they're going to have to get back to the, you know, the classic basic type of play where, okay, you've got speed, great, take the puck wide, and let's get somebody going to the net and cause some problems. But I'm sure that Claude will be addressing some of those areas, and they'll be quite ready to go next game.
Yeah, after Saturday's game against the Leafs, the Habs have like a week off. They don't play again until the following Saturday. So I imagine there'll be a lot of tough practices and a lot of film work if the Canadiens don't get this figured out before next week.
There better be, I guess, in their case. I'll have to say, like, all 3 of you guys made some incredible points here. Jess, I totally agree with you on the fact that the Canadiens have looked a little passive. In fact, some of the other teams they've played over the last few games have actually looked a lot more aggressive. Stu, you hit it on the nail with how the Senators played the Canadiens. They came up with a brilliant game plan to kind of shut them down and kind of clog them up the middle. The Canadiens definitely have not had the same amount of freedom on the ice and space that they've seen in games against the Vancouver, in games against the Edmonton. Rick, I kind of want to throw this to you here, since I know you have that experience as a coach. If you're in a situation where your team all of a sudden is getting pressured pretty much night in and night out after experiencing so much space and freedom on the ice, how do you play out of that?
Well, I think, you have to get back to the basics and remind the guys of, what gave them success before. And they're a team that has, and we talked about a number of times, they have great speed, they have great skill. But until you get them working together and in cohesion, which is not happening right now because you've got one guy going north, one guy going south, it's not all together, and this is causing problems with the possession game, and the result is not able to generate enough offensively. And I think that they're going to have to start to concentrate more on getting the puck to the right guy at the right time, and then as a group figuring out effort-wise. I don't see the same type of effort and desperation that they had in the previous games, and this is normal when you have a team that I guess is struggling a little bit, but they have to get involved a lot more. And you got to get some guys that are supposed to be able to score some goals. You can't, rely every night on Anderson and Toffoli to lead the pack. You've got some guys that haven't been able to find the net, and they're going to have to start to chip in order for them to get the corrections that they need to get.
Yeah, one of the guys they need to get going is Philip Deneau. I mean, no goals this season. He has 1 goal in the last 36 games. If you go back to last season, they're getting nothing out of him. You wonder about the pressure of a contract year. We mentioned Thomas Tatar earlier. It's a contract year for him also. That might be part of the frustration level with him. The concern with the way the Senators shut down the Canadiens, or were able to shut them down, is that this is the worst team in the NHL, the Senators. And they were able to come up with a game plan that worked. So what happens when better teams come up with a similar type of game plan? How are the Canadiens going to fight through that? I think we saw an example of that last night with the Leafs. So I think Claude Julien has some work ahead of him to do. Every team's going to go through a slump during any season. The same will happen to the Leafs at some point. They're on a roll right now. But as I said, the biggest concern is that the worst team in the NHL was able to come up with a game plan that for 2 straight games worked very well against the Canadiens.
It feels like with the Montreal Canadiens, even though they are going through the kind of mini slide that they're going through right now, offensively speaking, almost every episode we find ourselves kind of raving about some of the newer players that they've brought onto the team. We've already spoken at length about Tyler Toffoli. I find Josh Anderson has been killing it as of late. And Jake Allen, who I know we'll get to in a moment at some point, but Jake Allen obviously has done some pretty good things since joining the Montreal Canadiens in the offseason. Panelists, I leave this one up to you here. Which of the new Montreal Canadiens players do you think has made the biggest impact on the team so far?
I'm going to go with Josh Anderson. He was a player coming in with the Max Domi trade. Domi was a fan favorite here in the city and then kind of fell out towards the end of it. So I think there was pressure with that because there's a lot more focus on a trade. And the fact that he was injured as well and coming back to see if he would be able to be the kind of player that he was previously. And right off the bat, that he was able to come in, scoring goals, even the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, his first shot, it goes in, and he's been able to have an impact on these games. So for me, he's the newest player that has been impressing me so far this season.
If you want to show a video of what a power forward is, show Anderson's goal the other night. It hits Jake Muzzin almost into the Canadiens bench. It creates space, takes a pass, breaks in hard against the wing, cuts to the net, scores 5 goals. It was a power forward goal all the way. He's had a huge impact. But I wonder where the Canadiens would be right now without Jake Allen. Carey Price's save percentage is below 900. The reason he has a winning record is the Canadiens scored at least 4 goals in each of his first 6 starts before last night. Jake Allen has really stolen some points for this team. I say stolen because in previous seasons, the backup couldn't steal any points for the Canadiens, couldn't get any points. So Jake Allen has just come in. He's been steady. He's been a rock. He looks really calm and cool in the net. Carey Price, to me, just looks off. I mean, I'm not a goalie expert, but he seems to be going down a lot. He seems to be losing his net. He's getting beat short side to the blocker side quite a lot. So that's a concern. But, Jake Allen, to me, has had an impact just playing as many games as he has and playing so well. His save percentage is giving up a full goal a game less than what Carey Price is giving up. So he's had a huge impact on the team so far.
Like you guys, Josh Anderson obviously has been just great for the team, and I really enjoy watching him and the style that he brings, a nice ingredient to the Canadiens. And I also have to, like you, Stu, Jake Allen, what a great addition for a guy like that to step and get the job done. And, he's a guy that is a proven NHLer, and he's put in a situation that, there's a lot expected from him, and he's delivering. And you got to give him his full marks for him to be able to step in and do the job that he's doing. And, moving down the road here as the games start to get crunched into a tight schedule, I think you're probably going to see more and more of them.
Yeah, you have to be happy for a guy like Anderson. You watch him now and you wonder, how did he only score 1 goal in 26 games last season with Columbus? And that just shows you how bad that shoulder injury was that he tried to play through. He obviously wasn't himself last year. The shoulder looks fine now. The offseason surgery seems to have worked. Marc Bergevin took a gamble on his health when he signed him to that long-term contract after acquiring him. But right now, as Marc Bergevin said, these players, these type of power forwards, are very hard to find and very hard to get. And he's got one, and so far it looks really, really good. And if that shoulder is healthy, which it certainly looks like, expect big things from Anderson moving forward.
And I don't think the shoulder injury was as painful as what it was to play for John Tortorella.
Oh, you went there. You went there, Rick Green.
As the torch turns, their favorite reality show in Columbus right now.
Oh, man. Oh, man. One thing I want to mention about Josh Anderson here, and it still blew my mind, and I put it up on Twitter the other night. Josh Anderson, the first game he plays for the Montreal Canadiens, scores a goal where he comes along the wing, cuts to the net, and scores. The other night on Wednesday, you mentioned it, Stu, he hits the player, he hits Jake Muzzin, of all people, into the boards, and then cuts up the wing and cuts to the net. Do you guys remember the Toronto Maple Leaf who's dwarfing behind him, trying to chase him and losing him in the dust? It wasn't just any old scrub. John Tavares, the same Toronto Maple Leafs player, losing Josh Anderson just as he scores that goal. Also, for backup goaltenders here, I think Peter Budaj was the last backup to win 10 games for the Montreal Canadiens, not counting the 2015-2016 year where Carey Price ultimately lost his season to injury. So I think those two answers in particular, really solid answers. Surprised no one mentioned Tyler Toffoli. I know he scored all those goals against the Vancouver Canucks, but I still am really enamored with what he's been able to bring on the third line, and the fact that he's been able to help drive plays, and the fact that he's been able to score all those goals is a big asset to him, but also a bit surprised no one really mentioned him. I do want to move on to question 4, though, where we obviously go from the new players, we go to an issue that has caught fire on social media in particular, and I know Stu has been very worked up about this. The Montreal Canadiens and headshots. It seems like it's been an issue. I can point to at least 3 different instances where a Montreal Canadiens player, even if the head is not the direct point of contact here, or however the rules work, I'm not an expert on that. I have no clue how it works with the Department of Player Safety, but I digress. But you think of Jake Evans taking a shoulder to the head in Saturday's victory over the Ottawa Senators, Kotkaniemi taking a forearm from Dylan Dubé, the Calgary Flames, and we all know about Yoel Armia taking the hit from Tyler Myers, which ultimately sidelined him for a number of games. Panelists, in the absence of punishment from the National Hockey League, do you think the Montreal Canadiens will take justice into their own hands?
Edmondson already did against Tyler Myers for the hit on Armia, but it's ridiculous that it comes down to that in this day and age. I don't understand the NHL's thinking here. They obviously think there's some fans out there who like seeing guys get hit in the head and knocked unconscious and suffer concussions. I don't know who those fans are. The Don Cherries and the Brian Burks of the world, I guess. But I don't like seeing a guy going down on the ice and suffering a concussion. I like good, solid, hard body checks. And understand that some of them will result in concussions, even if it is a solid hit. But these headshots just keep coming and coming. George Parros, the former goon who runs the NHL Department of Player Safety, looks the other way. He's obviously following the rules, too, that the general manager's put in place. But, if you accidentally high stick a guy, if your stick comes up, even if it touches the shoulder first and it nicks a guy in the face, high sticking penalty automatic. If you nick him on the lip and it bleeds a little bit, 4 minutes. But a headshot, if it's unintentional, is a legal hit. Carry on, move on, add another concussion to the list. Player agent Alan Walsh calls it the National Concussion League. And that's what it is. And I just don't understand why it's just any hit to the head isn't a penalty. It would be so simple. The NFL is which has been behind in concussions. That movie that was made about concussions in the NFL. But the NHL just keeps burying its head in the sand, and I can't figure it out. I don't understand. You look at the concussion issues that Sidney Crosby went through, the greatest player of this generation, and for the NHL just to look the other way and say, okay, move on, carry on. And as you said, Julian, it sort of leaves it in the hands of the players, as Edmondson did against Myers, to have to fight him. So now what happens if Edmondson gets in the fight with Myers, knocks him out, he has a concussion, is carried off the ice? It makes no sense to me in this day and age that they allow it to continue. But it continues because the NHL wants these hits in. The NHL wants to keep headshots in the game, and I don't know why.
No, I agree with you, Stu. I mean, headshots should not be part of the game, and there's a number of them that have been going on, and the guys have been getting away with it and haven't been getting any type of suspension. So unless they make a statement and say, listen, this is not going to be part of the game anymore, you're going to if you do something like this, you're going to have to miss a game or two, and that's going to resonate throughout the league, and their guys are going to maybe think about it twice before they do something like this. And I don't know if they're waiting for guys to get carried off in stretchers, but I know that it's just unacceptable to see that these things are going on and they're not addressing it. And I know that as the players remember what goes on each and every game, they have remembered what guys did what. And I think that, when the timing is right, they'll address it internally.
Yeah, it just doesn't really make sense that it has to then come down to the hands of the players, because the league is sitting there and saying, oh, no, not our problem. We don't see an issue with it. When everyone's sitting at home, their own players see that this was definitely a headshot and needs to be corrected. They need to clean up the league. I don't necessarily know if it's right to have a former goon like George Peros, the head of player department of safety. Why not have a more skilled player, someone whose job wasn't to go out and intimidate the other player, be there to run this department instead? Because George Peros has a way of thinking that is probably a more old school way of thinking. And a lot of times that's when you see the old school hockey guys saying there's no problem with this. I think that a different point of view would help clean up the league. But as Stu mentioned, if the league doesn't see a problem with it, then there's not going to be any change.
I mean, Peros is a smart guy. I went to Princeton, but I mean, he sees the game different than a skilled player would see the game. He made millions of dollars to punch guys in the face. That was his job, to give guys concussions. That's what he was paid for. I just, you have to be responsible for your stick. If it's an accidental high stick, it's your fault. You need to be responsible. Why don't you have to be responsible for your shoulder, not driving it into a guy's head? But the NHL, we're talking about the fighting. If you watch when the NHL promotes games on TV, upcoming rivalries, they always show all the fights. So they like that part. They like to market it. And again, the NHL obviously thinks there's an audience out there that enjoys seeing guys take headshots. And I don't know who those fans are, but I guess they think they're out there.
It's time for our viewer question of the week. This one comes from Robert Dufour. Do you think the Montreal Canadiens will have a forward who averages 1 point per game this season?
Julian, if this question was asked a week, 2 weeks ago, I would have said, yes, there's a good chance. They had a bunch of different people scoring at a consistent rate, and it looked like the potential was there. But now that the Canadiens have hit a little bit of a stumbling block, I think it'd be a little bit too difficult to have a player that's going to be doing that. So I don't think it's going to be possible this year.
And I think everybody did get excited the way that the guys are racking up the points, and I don't see it. Obviously the last week has been tough on a number of guys, but I don't see if they have the talent or the skill to make a point per game type of production.
Yeah, I mean, through 13 games, Jeff Petrie has 14 points, Toffoli has 13, Suzuki has 12, Josh Anderson has 11, Julian has 11. So there's two guys that are at a point a game. There's a couple of other guys right below. But that's 13 games. 56 games is a long time. I just don't know if these guys have the ability to keep up that pace the whole way. Nick Suzuki, I think in the future looks like a point-a-game player. The fact he's such a good playmaker, the fact he can also score when he gets opportunities. Josh Anderson is more of a goal scorer, doesn't get a lot of assists, so it's unlikely for him. Jeff Petrie is a defenseman. That's a really big ask. So it's possible. But I think unlikely this season, although, like I said, I think that Nick Suzuki in the future looks like he could have the potential to be a point-per-game guy.
Yeah, Jess has it right. If this was a week or two ago, I know all three of you would be saying, "Oh, Nick Suzuki has the best chance to do it." Oh, Jonathan Drouin, he's actually been playing well. All of a sudden, the Canadians go through games against the Ottawa Senators where they're held to 2 games, and all of a sudden the players can't do it. What a change from all three of you! Incredible.
Well, consistency, right? That's the key in the NHL, and that's a point a game is there's not a lot of players in the NHL who do that, and the ones who do make a lot of money.
Yep, for sure. And I think we all make a considerable. You know what? I'm not even going to get to salaries at all. That'll do it for this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out. Thank you very much, Jess. Thank you very much, Rick and Stu. I'm still with you on your take from our 4th question on headshots, man. I still smell the smoke from all the fire you've been bringing up. If you have a question you'd like to see our panelists tackle on a future episode of this show, please add it to the comments section, and please be sure to visit Hockey Inside Out to check out more of our content.